building, so we haven't really conceived yet a show that isn't about the building or about space or about site. And members of the team, Felix in particular, that's his drive. Colin, or one of our other producers, Colin Nightingale, they're very excited about the experience of the site and the building. Whereas I tend to use the text as a starting point, and I start to daydream about the text and how I imagine that world appearing and that world revealing itself. So my process is actually I start with the text. I start with the score, all the sources, whether that might be the music sources that we're interested in, or film sources, artworks, and then I look through to try and identify particular kind of ideas. So for me, it's a process of actually stripping down to something that's very easily digestible and kind of manageable and translatable. So yes, I just strip the text down to try and find individual ideas, and then look at the kind of company that we're going to be working with that project in terms of performers. So for both Felix and I, performers are really, really important. So we have a core company, not a regular company, but we have a regular, not a permanently funded company performers, but we have a group of people that we have worked with regularly over the last 5 years, and they offer a sort of a combination of a particular skill, either physical skill, choreographic skill, and a kind of presence that's very enigmatic and charismatic, and that as an audience member you can be really drawn to them. So I suppose I start to invent. A creative process begins when I start to dream about the ideas and these people, and the ideas start to become alive when I start to imagine how a performer might embody these ideas. My main process is improvisation. So we spend a long time in the beginning of every day, or not a long time, but at least a good hour and a half, even to 2 hours actually, doing a warm-up, which leads into extended improvisations. It feels really important for my work that in order to have it's really important to set up a safe, nurturing environment for all of us to sort of work together in. I'm not a director that thrives on tension or fear or aggression. Our work has to be really collaborative, so I really need to feel that I can be really open with all of the performers, and I get that back from them, because ultimately in our work we're asking people to give a lot. We're asking people to trust, to go to places of emotional danger and places of emotional depth, and to really expose themselves and put themselves out there as people as well as performers. So we might set up an improvisation, and what I don't like doing is stopping and talking, and we don't sit down very much, and we don't sit around a table. People might play for an hour or 2 hours, and I keep throwing things into the studio to shift it. So whether that's changing the music, or it's bringing in props, or shifting with an object, setting up games, setting up structures. But it feels like the process is really organic, and it's really immediate, and it feels a little bit like pottery. It's like you're crafting these events moment to moment as they're sort of emerging. I kind of shift between being a choreographer and a director and a facilitator, because then it seems that the process shifts, and the performers are start to be given more particular tasks and more opportunity to create material for themselves and to make decisions. So I feel like hopefully within those first couple of weeks I've set up the framework, and I've kind of opened up the possibilities and set the parameters of the language, so that when people start making decisions, they're making decisions within the right framework. So people then start to create material in response to their starting points and towards their scene, so that when we then move onto the site, when people we go and work in particular rooms or in particular spaces, there's a concentration of language that is already in existence. So we have create this language, and then we put it into a space, and then it's rediscovered and reinvented in relation to the site. And then there's a real shift in process then, because it almost feels like the luxury of looking at the body and looking at the language is kind of gone, because then you're looking at that element in context with the building, which is a formidable partner actually to start to work with. And it feels like the building and you've got the building, you have the choreography or the physical language, and then you have the dancers, and then it's a little complex set of conundrums as to how all those partners work with each other. And it's quite a traumatic moment. It's very exciting because you've got some language and you've got this great building, but it's really traumatic because the building feels immense and the performers get lost and it feels completely impossible. But I think that's actually probably that's probably essential to all of our work. I think if it didn't feel impossible, we wouldn't be excited enough to take it on. So when we're on site, the process shifts, and then it becomes more about making, and it's making decisions, often very quickly and very instinctively, about setting language, setting stories. So one process is we have this language that we brought into the site, and this very particular task is to transpose that to a space. So, for example, a duet that was made in the studio is transposed to a window ledge, for example. That becomes the frame, and that becomes the point of reference for that choreographic material. Another process is very much about creating in response to the building and in response to the architecture. Another strategy is we block the audience, the performer have a journey around the space, and it's about those meetings, about the meetings they have with other performers as they come through the space, and that becomes the source or the starting point for something. And then in our work, we always, well, pretty much so far, in the performance work we've created, there's always an ensemble event, sometimes 2 or 3, and it feels they're kind of core to the ritual of the work, actually, and this idea that in this experience it's really fragmented and invisible and hiding behind corners and in nooks and in crannies, that from nowhere all the characters converge, and then this event happens. We need the right company of artists. That's really important. I think we do spend a long time making sure that we've got the right team together, both creative team and performing team. Everyone needs to commit to the idea everyone needs to agree to go on that journey, and everyone needs to go on pretty much on the same journey. I mean, people can take different routes and do little detours, but actually the kind of that shared journey towards a kind of a sense or an impression of a destination is really important. There has to be a kind of core level of trust running throughout. I think that's the basis. There's got to be an energy. There has to be a sense of risk taking and play. There has to be a kind of agreement in terms of the direction. Although that doesn't mean that everyone has to say yes to everything. It's not about saying yes. It's about asking the right kind of questions that are going to interrogate a process and an approach, rather than block it and stop it. I do have this dream where you'd really be able to have a lovely synthesis between your technical, your design team, your performers, and you know. So we always talk about, let's have a we'd love to have a waterfall, we'd love to make it rain, we'd love to have snow. But then so our dream would be to have, we'd have our studio transformed, or a space where we could go and work for a week, and we could have play with all these weather effects and play with all these resources. I think it's about having all of those, maybe the different ideas we're touching upon in terms of technology or design or costume, having those resources at your fingertips, so you can just, as soon as an idea appears, you feel like you really want to test it and play with it, that you can sort of jump onto that idea and see if it's got any legs.